we've ensured that their expectations have been addressed to understand that that is a particular area they need to keep eyes on, and we've resolved that immediately. And the system worked effectively the very next night, of course, where they were in position and they observed her trying to escape again.
That's not an oversight, is it? It's a failure.
Oh, I would just say this is a human error. These mistakes can happen. People on site are doing the best they can, and I'm extremely proud of every single staff member in our facilities. We've had nearly 60,000 people through managed isolation and quarantine, and a very small number have done the wrong thing. In this instance, a woman has intentionally escaped. She has
I do
the law.
understand that, Air Commodore, but the situation you have here is experience would lead you to do things differently so it doesn't happen again. So is it an instruction to security that all exits must be monitored at all times, either by alarm or by personnel?
That's right.
So they failed to do what is a basic requirement.
Yeah, as I said, Lisa, this is an instance where someone has made a mistake. This is a local on-site management function which we've cleared up very quickly. We understand that if people determine a mode of security to be the way they see it in terms of a roving mode rather than a stationary mode, in this instance that was the incorrect assumption, and we've been extremely swift in our assessment to say that was not right. We've contacted every other facility, Lisa, and confirmed that those practices are not taking place anywhere else, and we've taken immediate steps to make sure that the team on site know what their roles are.
So when you say it was an on-site team, let's be clear here. Who gave the instruction? Was it a private security company or was it Defence who are overseeing the movements of those security guards?
This was a private security team leader.
Okay, and the guards themselves, they were private security?
That's right.
So you're still using some private security at these facilities?
Yeah, we have some, and we know we have a phased-out approach here, and that continues.
So are you going to phase these guys out faster than you had anticipated, given what has happened?
We'll continue to negotiate through this process. At this stage, that's on track for third-party private security to be phased out by the end of the year.
Okay, so are they still on site? Do they still have the contract right now? Or have you got more of your own people there as a consequence of this?
They are still on site. The individual concerned has been stood down, and we have ensured that everybody else in that team is completely aware of the appropriate procedures to be carried out.
Okay, so the woman herself, she gets caught taking a second run at it, and you find out that she's actually managed to get out the night before. What's she been up to?
Well, that's an ongoing police investigation. These things are extremely serious and very frustrating, but we have worked closely with the New Zealand Police and the Auckland Regional Public Health Service to determine what public health risk she poses. We do have some CCTV footage to hand where we have established she's been in and around the Auckland City region, but we just want to be absolutely certain before.
Can you be more specific about that? What do you know about her movements? Where did she go? It's just over 2 hours, isn't it? So what was she filling her time with?
We've seen that she's been walking in and around the inner city area, and beyond that, we'll just continue to confirm through police investigations.
And from what you can see and know, what interactions did she have with other people?
What we see and we know is very few, very limited, and so that's always encouraging. We know that she tested negative this morning, and she is asymptomatic, so we're confirming that it's likely that it's a low-risk scenario. Would
this have been day 3 of her stay?
Day 3 is tomorrow.
Is tomorrow. Okay, so she's very early on, isn't she?
Yeah.
And we know that more infections tend to show up later in managed isolation, don't they? So we're not out of the woods yet with this woman.
No, quite right. And so we will be doing a normal day 3 test again tomorrow, and we'll be, if necessary, conducting further tests.
If she hadn't tried to do a runner on the second day, you would be blissfully unaware of this, wouldn't you?
Potentially. Again, I would say that these are hotels, not prisons, Lisa. I mean, we have a great mix of personnel and systems in place. But if somebody is motivated and determined to escape, then sometimes these things happen. I'll come back to the point that nearly 60,000 people have done the right thing and kept this country safe.
So did she leave the hotel at any other time? Are you sure that these are the only 2 incidents?
Yeah, she's only been here a short time, and we did do a reversal footage scan of the CCTV and can confirm that was the only time.
Okay, so what's happening with her now? Besides the fact that she's going to be tested again, is this a matter where she's going to be charged?
That's certainly a matter for the police to determine, and we'll leave that to them.
Okay, so you still have private security at this hotel, and you've got a phase-out date. What about your other facilities? Because when you look at it, it looks like they're not up to scratch.
Oh, I disagree. I think they're fantastic facilities. We, as I say, we were...
The security I'm talking about here.
Yeah, no, we contacted every single facility, and I wanted to determine for myself that there were no other procedures where we knew we needed to be monitoring systems indoors, and we have confirmed that that is the case.
So how many other days, Air Commodore, did you ask on how many other occasions have the fire doors been left unattended while people have gone on roving patrols?
What we wanted to do was make sure that those other security staff are aware of their obligations to observe those fire exit doors, and we've established that that is the case. People know.
But you don't know. Systems. You don't know how many other occasions that this has happened.
Well, I know that there are no other occasions this has happened to our knowledge. What I'm trying to explain to you, Lisa, is that we do have systems where those security forces are aware that they need to monitor, and that's exactly what they're doing.
Not another escape I'm talking about. I'm talking about whether you've spoken to the security guards about how often they leave those doors and have been leaving those doors unattended. Do you have a feel for that?
If you're talking about this location, we have spoken to the team leader and confirmed that practice is not appropriate. But across the entire portfolio of 31 other facilities, we've confirmed that those practices do not occur.
Okay. At this particular hotel, I understand that you've spoken to the head of security and they are now clear that this should not happen. But how many times have they left doors unattended that they should have been watching?
I don't have that detail to hand, Lisa.
Have they been asked if this was a common reoccurring practice?
What we have is a range of team members on site. We do have staff changes, and what I'm looking at here is an individual who's made a local determination for a particular evening. That, unfortunately, was an evening where somebody decided to willfully leave that location, and we caught it with our systems the very next night.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is the Head of Managed Isolation and Quarantine, Air Commodore Darren Webb. Wellington is poised to host the country's first international sporting event since the COVID-19 pandemic, when the All Blacks face off against the Wallabies on Sunday. But despite the dearth of international sporting action this year, and this being the first chance for fans to see the All Blacks in 2020, the match still isn't looking like a sellout. Regardless, the capital is gearing up to make sure it can cash in on some rugby fever. Jonathan Mitchell reports.
Come Sunday, more than 30,000 people will come here to Sky Stadium in central Wellington. There'll be a number of QR codes on hand so people can scan themselves into the stadium, as well as hand sanitizer to keep clean and safe. But despite it being the biggest sporting fixture to take place in Wellington this year, Sky Stadium isn't expecting a sellout crowd. Tickets are usually on sale months before match day, but they've only been on general sale since last Thursday. 30,000 tickets have been sold so far, with the stadium's chief executive Shane Harman saying roughly 5,000 tickets are still up for grabs and selling fast.
It'll go close, might not just get quite to capacity. The good news is that for anybody who's still intending to come, there are still tickets.
In the city centre, bars and restaurants are hoping to cash in on the fixture. They've been waiting for this moment after months and months of tough trading because of COVID-19. Eugene Worley from JJ Murphy's Bar on Cuba Street has big screens, a stocked bar and food prepped for a busy weekend.
We're treating Sunday like a Saturday night, so we're staffing up fully staffed, fully stocked. We've got 14 or 15 screens in this bar, so plenty of room for people who don't have tickets to come in and get themselves a seat.
Around the corner, closer to the waterfront, Four Kings' Alex Renison is excited about the rush through the doors.
Now we're down to level 1. It's probably the first real big event since going back to level 1, apart from the UFC last weekend. And obviously we've got next week as well, the Bloody Slow in Auckland. It should be a big Sunday. And then, it should be good. It's going to be a good month for us.
While there's no community cases of COVID, Director General of Health Ashley Bloomfield asks anyone feeling unwell to stay away from the stadium.
If you've got symptoms, I know it might be a pain, but give your ticket away to the Bleeders Low Cut match. Let's just not give away these gains. Just be sensible.
Met Service is forecasting a mostly fine weekend with highs in the mid-teens, with a northerly breeze picking up on Sunday. All Blacks coach Ian Foster has a clear message for sporting fans.
There's been a reasonable degree of uncertainty about when it was going to play and if it's going to get played, and now it's going to get played and the sun's shining, so let's get out there.
In Wellington for Checkpoint, caught Jonathan Mitchell. Aho.
It is 19 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback. Have you got a ticket for the game on Sunday? Will you be bothering to go? There's been so much brouhaha about it. I would have expected all Wellingtonians to be storming to the stadium. Also, what do you make of the latest escape from managed isolation? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Fallback's apologising to thousands of women who will be forced to change oral contraceptives because supplies of some pill brands are about to run out. About 25,000 women, take the 4 contraceptive pills affected: Brevinor 1/28, Noramin and Necon. The pharmaceutical company Pfizer doesn't expect them to be back in stock until mid-February next year. Fallback's acting medical director, Dr. Ken Clark, explains how widespread the problem is.
There's 2 principal ones that are in short supply, but also some of the alternative brands that we had organised when we knew about shortages of these are now short of supply as well. So it's a compounding problem.
And why are they short in supply?
It's a mixture of problems. Firstly, even well before COVID times, the company responsible here signalled that they were having some supply issues and production issues. On top of that, as I guess we're all aware, COVID has added a whole different dimension in terms of slowing up supply chains and production of all sorts of medicines, including, unfortunately, oral contraceptives.
OK, so there was an issue before COVID. What was causing that problem before COVID?
We don't know. The company did signal, though, that they were having difficulties with keeping up with demand and supply, and that's even back then we went and looked for some alternatives to help so that patients weren't left, women were not left without the exact formulation that they had been using. But as I say, not only are the out of stocks becoming more and more evident for these products, even the alternatives that we had arranged are now becoming problematic in terms of supplies.
Dr. Clark, when will they have all run out by?
Some of them very soon indeed, within the next few weeks, I'm afraid. Yeah.
And when are you likely to get more in?
The reality is, for some of them, possibly not until February next year. Naturally, we will hope for better than that, but to some extent, these are matters out of our hands.
So how widely used are these particular contraceptives, and what does it mean for these women?
Look, there are several thousand women using these particular contraceptives. Of course, many women use oral contraceptives, but these particular ones are not the most common, but there are still thousands of women that use these products. What in practice it means is that there are other oral contraceptives available that work as well, but may not unfortunately suit these women as well, particularly in terms of effects on their cycle and their menstrual cycle, etc. So, of course, it's not ideal. We would much rather this was not happening, but we are asking that women and, of course, health practitioners talk and think through options in terms of other oral contraceptives or, for that matter, other forms of contraception.
Have you given women and doctors sufficient warning that this was on the horizon?
Yes, we have, but it's fair to say that the warning has been short in some cases because it was very short in terms of us finding out about it as well. But as soon as we've known about it, we've communicated. But there's no doubt that in some cases this notice will be short, and we apologise for that. Again, I can truly say it's not of our making, but that doesn't make it easy for women and, of course, their prescribers.
So the two principal contraceptives that are in short supply are supplied by Pfizer, right?
Correct.
Fallback usually requires a guaranteed supply from companies, and companies that don't keep up that supply are in breach of contract. So is Pfizer in breach of contract here?
Look, we always look at those aspects. In general, the companies that we deal with are just tremendous in terms of maintaining their backup supplies and working hard, as Pfizer has, to help us find.
But it can't guarantee you security of supply right now. Is that correct? No guarantee of supply from Pfizer?
That's correct.
Were they obliged contractually to guarantee supply of these brands?
Where reasonably possible, and I think one has to consider that these are not ordinary times.
But you indicated that the problem started before COVID. So are you looking at whether they have breached their contract here?
Look, we do consider those matters, but having said that, Pfizer have worked very hard with us to not only in terms of the supply of these actual brands, but in terms of alternative supplies. They have, I believe, acted in good faith. So
will there be any penalty for the company?
Look, that's not something that I can speculate on. But as I say, it's a matter of good faith and of everybody trying to do the best so that we can get supplies for women.
Are there any other drugs that are in short supply right now?
There are a number of medicines that where we've had signalled potential shortages. To give you sort of broader perspective, there are always a small number of medicines where that's the case. But in 2020, given the circumstances, that number is of course greater.
So about how many do you reckon, Dr. Clark?
There are tens of medicines that are where there are issues about supplies. I'm pleased to say, though, that in all of those, because of stock that's held, because of efforts from companies and, of course, from Fallback, that those supply issues have been mitigated.
So which ones are in, critical situations?
There are no others at the moment that I would say were critical. Yeah.
Not even paracetamol?
No.
Okay. And so others that are in, in high risk of shortage, what sort of areas are we talking? What kind of drugs?
It's a general mix of all sorts of things, including hypertensive medicines and others. But it's across. With the issues with supply, it's affecting all sorts of aspects of medicines, not just, of course, critical care medicines. It's anything. Yeah.
And that's Dr. Ken Clark. And Fallback says there are other funded contraceptives available to women needing to switch because of the supply problem. And also the other drugs that there are supply issues with are listed on their website. Pfizer New Zealand has provided a statement which says Pfizer New Zealand is focused on providing a consistent supply of these contraceptives for patients and are committed to actively resolving this matter. Normal supplies are expected to resume in February next year. And Pfizer says patients who need to replenish their supply should discuss alternative contraception options with their healthcare professional. The tables turned on the campaign trail today with Judith Collins putting the boot into Labour, while Jacinda Ardern was forced to defend a minister. The National leader has spent the best part of the week dismissing disunity and dissent in her party after an email critical of her captain's call made its way from MPs' inboxes to the media. But today, the Labour leader was put in a position she would least like to be in 8 days out from the election, justifying money being spent by New Zealand First's Shane Jones. Our political reporter Joe Moyer is on the campaign trail and filed this report.
Judith Collins started her day in Blenheim talking about what Marlborough does best, wine.
And what got you into wine?
Too many gins on a Thursday night
okay.
on the man or two.
Right, okay. I'm loving this. Too many gins got me into wine. That's great.
Ms Collins was visiting the Sauvignon Blanc capital of the world, and after staged walkabouts in central Auckland on Wednesday, she would have been relieved to have more than 200 supporters voluntarily turn up to her public meeting. She was greeted with a standing ovation and something she loves even more.
Thank you very much. Oh, and there's a book for me to sign. Excellent. I'll definitely do that too. Oh, and another one, and another one. Oh, wow. Okay, and another one.
But at the same time, at the other end of the country in Northland, Regional Economic Development Minister Shane Jones was announcing hundreds of marae would be upgraded thanks to $96 million of government funding, more specifically, cash from the Provincial Growth Fund. The money is expected to create more than 3,000 jobs, with 351 marae set to benefit. Ms Collins says splashing that sort of cash in an attempt to buy votes so close to election day is outrageous.
Presumably Jacinda Ardern knows about it, and Grant Robertson signing it off with Shane Jones. So it is extraordinarily arrogant, but worse than that, it's absolutely verging on a corruption of the system. It should not be happening.
New Zealand First leader Winston Peters says any suggestion the policy announcement's dodgy is racist.
Do you think it's not racist to start making that allegation? They never said about the museums, they never said about the council buildings, they never said about the churches. But hello, when critical investment in the marae structure, which is part of our core tradition and history, and where education, health and all sorts of programs are run in the only IT centres in some parts of New Zealand, out comes the same old reaction. Well, we're not going to bow down to that sort of behaviour.
Ms Ardern agrees the criticism is unfair.
I don't agree that that's a fair characterisation. What we have done is continued the rollout of shovel-ready projects as part of the COVID recovery. In some cases, this will have been funding that those applicants will have been part of applying for some months ago. It is important that we keep the job of the recovery going in spite of the fact that there's also a campaign on.
Ms Collins was adamant it hadn't happened on National's watch.
So you can hand on heart say that when National was in government during a campaign period, you weren't doshing out money like that?
No, we would be, obviously, as a party, you'd be talking about what your plans were for after the election, but suddenly, right now, as ministers, putting out that money, that's outrageous.
But Ms Ardern's team was quick to find examples from the last campaign disproving that, including tourism infrastructure and new science research projects. There were new policy announcements today, though none captured quite as much attention as Mr Jones' ministerial one. In Northland, Ms Ardern was pledging to roll out a meth treatment program to 4,000 more people if re-elected. Labour's also promising to defend kauri trees from dieback by using the Biosecurity Act's strongest form of protection, a national pest management plan. Back with her Prime Minister's hat on again, Ms Ardern then officially opened a long-planned community hub in Kawakawa. Winston Peters didn't announce any new policy today, despite pledging to do exactly that every day up until election day. Back in Blenheim, Judith Collins was promising to make customers fork out for wine tastings at the cellar door. Currently, businesses are not able to charge for the samples they offer, unless 85% of their revenue comes from the sale of alcohol. The only blip in her day was news former leader Simon Bridges had told media he and other MPs hadn't seen internal party polling in months.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, I don't know what he said there, but I would say to him is get on the campaign calls like all the other candidates.
Other than that, Judith Collins swears she's having fun. From Blenheim for Checkpoint, Joe Moyer.
And just returning to a story we had earlier in the program about the escape from managed isolation, and we did an interview with Air Commodore Darren Webb. We've had this message in from someone who works at managed isolation. They say, I'm an isolation centre guard since March. Fire escape doors are not all monitored at multiple centres, but covered by roving patrols. Tonight, dozens and dozens of fire escape doors will not be monitored, unless NZDF staff, who principally play cards all day and watch movies, are scrambled to guard these doors. They've never been covered 24/7 in the past on the basis the facilities are not prisons. 40 security staff made redundant this week in Christchurch alone. Private contractors replaced by public sector soldiers who don't want to be there. Now, that is in relation to the escape from managed isolation. The woman went out via a fire escape that wasn't alarmed and had nobody watching it. And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, Wellington's pest eradication efforts are under attack. A COVID document dump reveals the Electoral Commission's concerns about an October election. And part of a grandmother's crock pot is found as the clean-up from the devastation of Oho fires continues. We would love your feedback. Have you got tickets to the Bledisloe match, or are you giving it a miss? You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or send us an email. The address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time for the headlines now with Susanna.
A woman who absconded from a managed isolation facility in Auckland is likely to face police charges. The head of managed isolation and quarantine, Darren Webb, says the woman who arrived from Dubai earlier this month was found trying to leave the Grand Millennium Hotel through a fire exit this morning. When police spoke with her, they found she had absconded the previous night and had walked around the inner city for around 3 hours. Australia has reported no COVID-19 related deaths in the last 48 hours, the longest stretch with no fatalities from the virus in 3 months. It cements optimism that the country has contained a second wave of the infection. In the epicentre state, Victoria, there are now less than 200 active infections. Nationals leader says the government's decision to spend $96 million on upgrading Marae is outrageous and unacceptable. The Regional Economic Development Minister Shane Jones announced the spending today, saying it would create 3,000 jobs and help local communities. But Judith Collins says it's totally wrong to announce such spending just 8 days before the election, and she doesn't think it'll help Mr Jones win in the Northland seat where he is standing. And almost 600,000 New Zealanders have already voted. Hundreds of thousands of people more than the same time last election. The Electoral Commission says it may be that early voting exceeds its estimate of 60% of total votes. The early voting count in the 6 days so far is just short of 100,000 people per day. Police investigating the death of a 21-year-old man in South Auckland last Saturday are looking for 2 men who attacked him. Nigel Fuatimu died in Jellicoe Park in Manurewa from injuries suffered during the attack, thought to be random and unprovoked. Detectives say there's no indication the attackers knew Mr Fuatimu. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just tuning in, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. It's time for the business news now. Happy Friday, Giles.
Happy Friday, Lisa.
You have somewhat poetically indicated that you wish to speak about the latest straw in the wind of economic recovery. Enlighten us all.
It's an Elton John line, I have to admit, yeah, or something like that. It seems appropriate, given that we are in spring looking at summer, that we should be looking for the green shoots of growth and recovery. And we've had another one of them today, and it comes from the ANZ Bank, who seems to have almost a monopoly on putting out these sorts of indicators. It's their trucking indicator, the truckometer as they rather horrendously call it. Their heavy traffic indicator, which gives you a real-time snapshot of economic activity and how it's faring. It's up 4% last month on the month before. The light traffic index, which looks 6 to 12 months ahead, so that gives you a future view on potential activity, is up by around 12%. The important thing is that both of these indices are back to where they were before the pandemic hit, so it's almost their best levels in a year. And that tallies with the business confidence survey that came out yesterday, which ANZ also the author of that, called Remarkable because of firm's own activity confidence was actually back in the black. It was positive, although headline sentiment was negative. So these green shoots of recovery give hope perhaps that there will be a better than expected rebound in the economy from the pandemic. We've yet to see whether it's actually going to hold up with Christmas spending, holiday spending. It may be that people are just being a little bit gun shy and will be cautious on that one. But to all intents and purposes, you have to say that it looks reasonably positive from here, and that gives us some cause for optimism going into 2021.
What about the local markets, Giles? There's a new, lifetime high, you say. What's driving that?
Well, it's all the elements that we've been talking about in recent months. Essentially, it's low interest rates. It's a ton of money sloshing around financial markets, being printed by the central banks around the world. Our own Reserve Bank, of course, is in there with its bond buying program. And what it's doing is that it's money looking for a good return on the investment. You're not going to get that by leaving it in the bank, so people are putting it into shares. And that's what's fueling the market here. Also markets around the world. Interestingly, I was at a Reserve Bank briefing yesterday where they were giving us some details about perhaps some of the other tools they will use to help stimulate the economy. And the comment was made, well, aren't you a bit worried about just throwing more fuel on the fire of, for instance, the housing market? And the view was, actually, the worst thing that could happen to us, the first thing they said was, A, we're surprised about how strong it has been, and B, actually, we're not worried about house price rises, we'd be more worried about house price falls. And it would be the same with the share market. Not worried about an appreciating share market, but one that actually took a bit of a sudden dip because, of course, it destroys wealth. It makes people pull their heads in and they don't spend. You don't have that wealth effect being created. So from that point of view, people... if you're in a KiwiSaver scheme, of course, you're doing quite well. I can tell you that the share market up 45 points today, about 0.33% at 12,281. I don't like to be a Jeremiah, but there will be a clean out, I suspect, between now and the end of the year. It's the nature of financial markets. And just to round out that market recap, on the currency front, Kiwi dollar at 66 US cents, 92 Australian, and just touching 51 British pence.
Hey, Giles, before you head off, have you got your ticket for the Bledisloe Cup game? Wrong shape ball, isn't it, for you?
Can I say that it's a minority sport for me, and I'll leave it for those who will enjoy it more.
Thanks, Giles. Have a good weekend. Giles Beckford with our business wrap there. While party leaders are still traversing the country trying to sell their message, hundreds of thousands of people have already cast their vote well in advance of the election. Voting is up more than 50% on the same period last time round, with people seemingly eager to have their say or get it out of the way. Jordan Bond reports.
A range of views on voting, early or not, in Auckland and Hamilton.
Yes, I voted on the first day available, and that's just because of the ease of it and getting it over and done with. And I think the election's kind of dragging on.
No, I haven't, because I'll do it on the day, just because that's the day we vote.
To avoid the rush, I had determined my vote fairly early.
It's very convenient avoiding long queues.
To be honest, I just had a free moment and I saw the sign and I thought I'll go and do it now before there's loads of queues.
This is my first time. I just want to make sure I make the right decisions.
It seems there's a lot more interest in voting before Election Day itself. Less than a week into early voting, and the country's already logged 500,000 votes, well ahead of the same time last election, which itself was many times more than the 2014 election. Chief Electoral Officer Alicia Wright says they didn't expect this amount of interest.
In 2017, we had 47% of the population vote early. We anticipated that it would be around 60%. So we've seen numbers coming in at higher numbers than what we thought we would see.
She says hundreds of polling stations have been open this week around the country.
The ones that have been busiest have been the ones in the malls and the ones that are near shopping areas. And so people are clearly seeing that in their day-to-day life and popping in and voting.
Enrolment numbers are also up from 90 to 91%, with the biggest increase in voters 18 to 29, 75% compared to 71 last time round. Voters say there's a bit to think about this election.
As I get older, I think every election becomes more and more important. And this year I think there's probably more at stake compared to previous years.
I think there was more thought in terms of that there was the additional referendums, of really doing thorough reading and exploring all the issues and looking at the draft legislation and really contemplating. You really need to think hard about the two referendums.
Early voting is expected to surge tomorrow with another 600 voting places opening. That'll mean 1,000 booths are open for people to cast their vote. People can enrol and vote on any day up to and including election day with no ID needed, though the Electoral Commission says it can be faster if you bring your Easy Vote card. For Checkpoint, Jordan Bond.
Days before Jacinda Ardern changed the election date to October, the Electoral Commission warned they'd struggle to make the date work. The latest tranche of documents on the government's COVID-19 response also show just 500 of an estimated 7,000 border and managed isolation workers were tested in early August. Less than a week later, community transmission was again discovered in Auckland. Here's political reporter Charlie Drever.
The day Auckland went into lockdown for the second time, documents from the Ministry of Justice show the Electoral Commission thought the election should be pushed out to November 21st. 5 days later, and amid pressure from her political opponents, Jacinda Ardern announced it would be moved, but from September 19th to October 17th. That was despite the Commission's initial advice that date would not give it enough time to set up advance and election day voting services again. National leader Judith Collins wasn't aware of that.
She takes the advice that she likes to get. I mean, that's part of her role, is to look at the advice and decide what she wants. But, you know, if the Electoral Commission said November, it's certainly not something I recall her sharing with me.
She wanted the election to be delayed to November or later because of how hard campaigning is with local lockdowns in place.
It's been very difficult to actually be able to even have the sorts of crowds that we've had today until recently, and even in the South Island where there was no COVID-19 community spread, it's been very hard with that.
New Zealand First leader Winston Peters wanted a November election too.
Well, we always used to have elections in November. The reason was that because the summer, getting near the summer, the weather would be far more reliable, and having elections in the middle of winter, which we've had, is just not having any regard to the general population and how inconvenienced they are.
The Commission generally advises avoiding dates within the school break and provincial or statutory holidays. That left only October the 17th or November the 21st as potential dates without changing the law. 3 days before Jacinda Ardern announced her decision, another document stated a October 17 election could be possible, but not having the workforce was still a big risk. Jacinda Ardern defended holding the election in October.
After some written advice was received, I sat down and met with the Electoral Commission. They then subsequently came back and revised some of their advice, suggesting that the date that we have now was feasible.
And Ms Ardern is happy with the election's delivery so far.
I think ultimately the proof is in the pudding. We can see the Electoral Commission very successfully already running the election through advance voting, and so that demonstrates that advice they gave was correct.
Another document in today's information dump shows just 500 of an estimated 7,000 border and managed isolation staff were tested for COVID-19 in the first week of August. 5 days later, the first COVID-19 cases in the Auckland August cluster were reported. Jacinda Ardern says the issue of testing at the border has already been well traversed.
When we saw the numbers as they were, we were putting in requirements and requests of health to keep boosting those numbers. But these are all issues that have been well traversed. The documents that you're now seeing are simply the things we were reflecting in Parliament at the time.
The day before the new cases were reported, Cabinet signed off on strengthening the testing regime that applies to maritime port workers. For Checkpoint, Charlie Drever, DNA.
It's 12 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. In Europe, the coronavirus situation has taken a rapid turn for the worse. Overnight, Germany recorded a 40% surge and officials say they're at risk of losing control. Poland, the Czech Republic and Ukraine all reported record case numbers. And in the UK, there's speculation another clampdown is just days away. The ABC's Nick Doyle reports.
When Boris Johnson stepped outside number 10 Downing Street, he would have been expecting this question from the gathered media.
When are new restrictions coming, Prime Minister? Do you plan to shut the pubs?
He declined to respond, but the answer is coming, most likely within days. 17,000 new cases were reported overnight, a rise of more than 20% on the day before. The north of England is the big area of concern, and that's where the new restrictions are likely to fall. These shoppers in Leeds are contemplating a potential shutdown of pubs and restaurants or even an outright ban on social mixing.
Well, if it's going to get rid of this virus again, then, we're going to have to put up with all this.
It's not working, is it? We've been locked down and wearing masks for weeks and weeks, and it's still going up.
Until recently, the government seemed content to let the case numbers tick up gradually because hospital admissions and deaths remained low. But there's now roughly 600 coronavirus patient admissions every day, and overnight 70 people died. And just like last time, there are warning signs coming from the continent. In Madrid, dozens of soldiers wearing headsets are hitting the phones trying to help trace coronavirus cases. The Spanish capital has one of Europe's worst outbreaks. More than 700 people per 100,000 are infected. Despite that, a court has just overturned a partial lockdown that prevented people from leaving their local areas. It's created confusion for Madrid residents like Oscar Borja. I think it's a bit of a joke, if I'm honest, he says. They're putting out new measures and then they take them away the next day. France has just recorded 18,000 daily cases, a near record. And in Paris, about half the intensive care beds are now filled with COVID patients. Italy just notched up 4,000 daily cases, the highest since the April peak. Face masks are now mandatory outdoors nationwide.
And that was the ABC's Nick Dole. Debris thought to be from the missing cargo ship Gulf Livestock 1 has been found close to where it sank, near the Tokara Islands in Japan. It's raised the hopes of family members, including 2 New Zealanders who were on board the ship. Caleb Fotheringham reports.
The ship was carrying 43 crew and close to 600 cattle and sunk during a typhoon in early September. The crew included 2 Australians, 36 Filipino sailors and 2 New Zealanders who were stock handlers. The official search for survivors has been scaled back, but a private search is continuing, funded by private donations. Aircraft have been flying over the area and have found some dead cattle and some debris from the ship. Harry Morrison is a friend of the missing Australian sailor, Will Mainprize. He is determined to keep the search going.
We are going over with helicopters, so not fixed-wing planes, which we have been using. The helicopters will be going over and circling around the island and looking for signs of life on the islands.
Sean Aladio is the president of International Rescue Instructors Association and has been asked to help with the investigation by friends of Mr. Mainprize. She says the finding of the debris suggests the sailors could still be alive.
People could be on the island. And so that debris that you're seeing is evidence that items, if an item made it to an island, why could humans not make it to an island as well?
Miss Aladio wants the search extended.
An open ocean search is required because the drift pattern of the original life raft was heading out to sea, and that's verified evidence with the wind patterns and storm and the swells. So the life rafts, most probably, if they didn't ground on an island, they would have run out to sea, open water, into the Pacific, and they would have hit the current.
But Harry Morrison says the future of the search is reliant on people donating to the cause. He's no longer expecting much help from the Japanese Coast Guard or the New Zealand and Australian governments.
We have gotten to the point where we can't rely on the Japanese Coast Guard or the Australian New Zealand government to be conducting the search. This is purely from the generous donation of people. This is the power of people, and this is how this search and rescue operation is being conducted.
The family of one of the missing New Zealanders, Lockie Wallabies, says they remain hopeful and are contributing funds to the search. They want to thank the many generous New Zealanders who have donated funds to the Give a Little page. In a statement, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade said it remains in close contact with the Japanese Coast Guard and passes on any new information to the families. For Checkpoint, Caleb Fotheringham.
Part of a grandmother's crock pot is among the little left of a Lake Oho home lost in one of the most destructive fires the country has ever seen. Fire and emergencies contained the fire at Lake Oho, but 48 structures have been destroyed, along with more than 5,000 hectares of land. Lydia Batham reports.
Lake Oho residents are now picking through the wreckage of their homes. According to Waitaki District Mayor Gary Kircher, they're grappling to come to terms with what they've lost and trying to salvage what they can.
Someone saw in the remains of their place the lid off a crock pot which had belonged to the grandmother, and given that they've lost pretty much everything else, that's one of the things they want because it's something that has some memories attached to it. It's when they get in there and do see what little is left, those little things become very important.
Fire crews remain dampening down hotspots and strengthening a fire break and will be on site over the weekend. Loose metal needs to be cleared before strong winds arrive, and power lines need checking before power can be reconnected to surviving homes. But residents still have to be escorted to the village, and while officials have begun working with insurers to try and fast-track the road to recovery, the mayor says it'll take years.
It's not something where really things are going to be fixed in a few weeks or even a few months. It's definitely something that's going to go on for the next couple of years as rebuild happens. But the community absolutely feels the love that it's getting.
Meanwhile, the former head of the Rural Fire Service says more fires like the Lake Oho blaze are inevitable because of 2-metre-high tussock growing on docklands in the South Island. Murray Dudfield spent 24 years with the National Rural Fire Office before retiring and tried for years to get DOC to reduce the growth of flammable vegetation, but nothing happened. He believes managed burns on the landscape at Lake Oho would have reduced the fire danger.
Those lands were retired under the land tenure review, and those fuels have been allowed to build up, and I'm afraid it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when those areas burn. A lot of those tussock grasslands, they tell me, were over 2 metres tall. So if you get ignition, those lands will burn.
Murray Dudfield says DOC should re-examine research on planned fires and incorporate it into its land management. For Checkpoint, Lydia Batham.
Wellington's environment and conservation efforts are under siege after a spate of malicious or ignorant attacks. A wildlife sanctuary's fence has been slashed, large bags of bread were ditched and strewn about a huge pest trapping project, and paint has been dumped down the drain. Hamish Cardwell filed this report.
Wellingtonians are justifiably proud that after decades of conservation efforts, the city and surrounding suburbs now resound with native birdsong.
I have a ruru in my garden and I hear them every night, and this morning the tui were really loud at like 5:30 this morning, and the kaka flock across at night. It's definitely it's a daily thing.
The Zealandia Eco Sanctuary is the reason most of the birds are back. It is 225 hectares of predator-fenced native bush, home to rare and endangered birds and other species, just a few kilometres from the city's downtown. But earlier this week, someone used a power tool to cut a hole in the sanctuary's fence, exposing the priceless taonga to possible destruction from predators. Just days later, a ute load of bread was found dumped throughout Miramar, imperiling efforts in the peninsula to completely eradicate pests. And last week, workers poured litres of paint into a stormwater drain, with the toxic substance staining streams and a duck pond in the nearby botanical gardens white. Locals are fuming.
Disgusted and angry. Very sad.
It feels so wasteful that undoing so much work and effort.
Really sad that people don't respect the nature and the place that it has in a city.
And it stops people from, they'll think, why bother with these initiatives if people are just going to come in and undo them? But that's the whole reason why we should bother with it.
Dan Henry from Predator Free Miramar agrees it is a blow to the collective efforts of the many volunteers trying to bring back native wildlife to the city.
A lot of people have worked really hard to get to where we've got to already with, bringing the birds back. And we have people who are not just trapping in their own backyard, but they're out every weekend for a couple of hours at a time, clearing traps, rebaiting, refilling bait stations, and taking time out of their own family weekends to do something for the betterment of the whole community.
Wellington City Councillor Terry O'Neill, who is the Environment Portfolio Leader, says the malicious attack on Zealandia has forced it to waste precious resources checking its animals are safe.
Zealandia's had to go on high alert. It means that every single trap inside the fence has to be reset and monitored, behaving as if potential predators have got in, and that's just a waiting game, which is really, really disappointing.
While Zealandia was purposefully targeted, Ms O'Neill says there have been no threats or reasons to believe the other incidents are anything other than individual stupidity and ignorance. Nonetheless, Tom Key from Forest and Bird says the cumulative effect of these actions can be absolutely disastrous for species on the precipice.
Our native species are so close to breaking point. We're talking about 4,000 species that are threatened or at risk of extinction, and a lot of them live in the backyards of Wellingtonians in particular, but across the country. And every time there is an impact like this, we've made all this progress with tui and kaka in the city in Wellington, and a stoat or something like that getting into Zealandia would be a huge setback for these species that are already kind of on the brink.
The police say they investigated the willful damage at Zealandia, but have no leads, so anyone with information should contact them. For Checkpoint, ko Hamish Cardwell tēnei.
Some quick feedback before the news at 6 on the woman who escaped from managed isolation. This person says, I think this is another selfish person determined to get out. She should be prosecuted and sent to prison, not in managed isolation, as she cannot be trusted. On the contraceptives shortage for 4 brands, this person says, I got caught out during lockdown, very poor information available on what I should do. My GP suggested an alternative that I transitioned to, but it had side effects.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leatawa tēnei. Human error is being blamed for a woman trying to abscond for a second time from an isolated facility in Auckland. She was caught trying to leave Grand Millennium Hotel through a fire exit early this morning and admitted that she had absconded the previous night and walked around the inner city for a few hours. The head of Managed Isolation and Quarantine, Darren Webb, says on that night there had been a change of security procedures.
Security staff should have been observing that door at that time. They were directed by the local team leader to be on a roving mode, and we see that it's an oversight. It's not good enough.
Air Commodore Webb says the woman has tested negative to COVID-19 and changes are being made to security arrangements. He says charges are likely to be laid. Shane Jones is insisting the decision to pay $96 million for upgrading more than 300 marae has nothing to do with boosting his election prospects. The Regional Economic Development Minister says the program will create 3,100 jobs and give a boost to many provincial towns and cities. National Party leader Judith Collins says the decision is outrageous and designed to help Mr Jones win the Northland seat in next weekend's election. But Mr Jones says that's wrong.
My constitutional mandate and my authority within the Cabinet guidelines is beyond reproof. This is simply headline hunting, and it shows a poor and very weak understanding of how jobs are created and sustained in rural New Zealand.
MP Shane Jones. An Environment Court judge is pleased with what he describes as excellent progress and plans to remove toxic waste from a Matoda paper mill. New Zealand aluminium smelters and Rio Tinto agreed 2 years ago to remove the more than 10,000 tonnes of dross stored at Matoda and other sites around Southland. But so far nothing's happened. The Environmental Defence Society is seeking a ruling over who is legally responsible for the waste from the Tiwai Point aluminium smelter and wants it gone by Christmas. Judge Laurie Newhook says efforts to speed up the process are underway and he has scheduled a follow-up court hearing next week to review progress. Fallback is apologising to thousands of women who will be forced to change their oral contraceptive because supplies of some pill brands are about to run out. About 25,000 women take the 4 contraceptive pills affected: Brevanor 128, Norman and Nekon. The pharmaceutical company Pfizer does not expect them to be back in stock until mid-February next year. Pharmac's acting medical director Dr Ken Clark has told Checkpoint the shortage is not of its making, but that doesn't make it easy for the affected women. He says Pfizer signalled it was having supply and production problems even before the coronavirus pandemic. Australia has reported no COVID-19 related deaths in the last 48 hours, the longest stretch with no fatalities from the virus in 3 months. It cements optimism that the country has contained a second wave of infections. In the epicentre state Victoria, there are now less than 200 active infections. Australia has reported a total of more than 27,000 cases and around 900 deaths. Vandalism at Wellington's Zealandia Bird Sanctuary has led to Forest and Bird reminding people how thoughtless actions can have terrible consequences for the environment. Zealandia's pest-proof fence was recently slashed. A ute load of bread was dumped in a pest trapping project, and paint has been tipped down a stormwater drain. Tom Key from Forest and Bird says the cumulative effect of these kinds of actions is absolutely disastrous for the 4,000 species on the edge of extinction.
A lot of them live in the backyards of Wellingtonians in particular, but across the country. And every time there is an impact like this, we've made all this progress with tui and kaka in the city in Wellington, and a stoat or something like that getting into Zealandia would be a huge setback for these species that are already kind of on the brink.
Tom Key from Forest and Bird. The police want to hear from anyone who knows anything about the willful damage at Zealandia. The Graham Dingle Foundation says its program supporting 1,300 young people in Papakura in South Auckland is in jeopardy. A key sponsor has pulled their support for the program, blaming the COVID-19 pandemic. The foundation runs the Kiwi Can program in 5 primary schools in Papakura and the STAR program at 1 high school. The foundation's Auckland manager, Sian Neri, says it's sad to see the partner, a major retailer, leave, and it's a shock. She says if they don't raise the money needed, their programs might not be able to continue, and that will be bad for Papakura youth. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 6. The best fullback in the country will start the All Blacks' first test of the year on the right wing. Geordie Barrett will wear the 14 jersey in Sunday's Bledisloe Cup opener in Wellington, with brother Bowden Barrett getting the nod at fullback. Coach Ian Foster says Geordie Barrett is the form 15, but he still has work to do before he's considered one of their 2 playmakers.
Can he? Yes, he can. Is it his strength? No, it's not. But is he working on it? Yes. So the answer is that that's a requirement of our game, and so he's working hard in that space.
All Blacks coach Ian Foster. Lydia Ko's quest for a 3rd golf major and first win in 2.5 years is off to a good start. The Kiwi is tied for 3rd after the opening round of the PGA Championship in Pennsylvania, just 1 shot behind co-leaders American Brittany Lincecum and Kelly Tan of Malaysia. Ko had 4 birdies and 2 bogeys in her 2 under par 68 and says it was a solid effort.
It was pretty tough out there with it being breezy. I feel like every day, even though the wind might say like 10 or 12 mile an hour, it always feels a little bit higher than that. So I try to play consistent, and I feel like I've done that well. So hopefully I'll be able to continue doing that.
Meanwhile, fellow New Zealander Ryan Fox is in a tie for 8th, 2 shots off the lead after the first round of the European PGA Championship at Wentworth in England. American football's NFL has been forced to postpone 2 upcoming games after a number of positive COVID-19 tests among players and staff on multiple teams. That's the news.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
While it's very easy to criticise businesses for what you think might be poor behaviour, you have to look at, I think, each business in those circumstances and then see what they do afterwards.
Live with local, national and international stories and some music with your news.
So he decided he was going to set up his own Maori version of Motown. So he started a label called Maui Records.
Up to date if you're up late. Lately with Karen Hay every weeknight from 10 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula. Cloudy with isolated showers clearing by evening. Patchy light rain or drizzle developing tomorrow morning. Bay of Plenty to Taranaki. Cloudy. Scattered showers about Taranaki spreading elsewhere tomorrow morning. Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington. Also Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Fine spells. Cloud increasing tomorrow. Marlborough to Southland. Fine apart from some cloudy areas about the Marlborough Sounds. Tomorrow, cloud increasing. increasing and scattered rain developing in the afternoon and evening. Nelson and Buller, cloud increasing and occasional rain developing tonight. Westland and Fiordland mainly fine today, but cloudy periods in Fiordland, rain developing tomorrow with heavy falls during the afternoon and evening. And Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and the odd light shower clearing tomorrow night. RNZ National, it's almost 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Motels and accommodation providers receiving millions of dollars in emergency housing payments from the government have also claimed tens of thousands of dollars in wage subsidies. One Auckland property management company has been paid more than $12 million to house the homeless over the past 18 months, but it also managed to get more than $50,000 in wage subsidies, with the Ministry for Social Development now looking into a formal complaint made about the money. Nita Blake-Person reports.
As the country scrambled into level 4 lockdown back in March, making sure everyone had a place to stay was a priority.
This is an immediate response, but we're also acutely aware of the fact that we need to be working now on what comes next for these people.
Housing Minister Megan Woods announced $107 million to house rough sleepers during and after the pandemic. That money added to Ministry for Social Development funds already flying out the door to house the homeless. Among the recipients was Fern Property Services, an Auckland property management company which teed up accommodation for people in private rentals. Between January 2019 and the end of June 2020, it received more than $12 million in payments. Auckland social worker at ME Family Services, Alistair Russell, says many of the properties were in terrible condition and the costs were huge.
Income that these companies have accrued at the expense of exploiting the homeless issue and needs of the community. This is at that level deplorable.
More than $50 million was paid out to MSD's top 10 accommodation providers for emergency housing grants in the 18 months to June. The longest stay in emergency housing so far has been recorded in the Auckland region. It cost $206,000 for one person's 99-week stay. While Fern Property Services received the largest payout in the 18 months to June, 4 of the top 10 accommodation providers claimed the wage subsidy as well as their emergency housing grants.
There's an ongoing reliance on a free market to sort out social housing need, and how many times do we have to see examples where that model of free market solution simply enriches a few and continues to leave people without housing resources and sources for permanent housing. This is incredibly stupid.
Businesses receiving the government's wage subsidy had to have a predicted or forecast drop in revenue of 30% in the first instance, and that increased to 40% during the wage subsidy extension. Independent tax researcher Michael Gourmet says he struggles to see how the motels, hotels and property managers qualified.
There seems to be an element of morality that's missing from some people's thinking here about what this process was all about.
He hopes businesses that found they didn't need the money would return it with interest.
The wage subsidy, I think, was a great idea, but at the end of the day, it's certainly been taken advantage of, and certainly there's a need to support smaller businesses. But surely by organisations that are taking these large sums, potentially that's disadvantaging other businesses that could probably have had a bigger payout for a longer period of time and keep them going rather than seeing them folding. Like we're starting to see now.
Fern Property Services is no longer in business. It said after the first lockdown lifted, the Ministry for Social Development moved all of its clients out of their properties. They defended the condition of the properties they provided MSD, but said they planned on paying back the wage subsidy after it came to their attention they no longer met the criteria needed to receive it. In a statement, MSD confirmed it had received a complaint in regard to Fern Property Management. They also audited 2 other accommodation providers in relation to the wage subsidy, but say no action was required. For Checkpoint, Cornita Blake-Person, TNA.
Family planning wasn't planning for an unprecedented shortage of oral contraceptives, but it's now faced with supplies of 4 brands running out in the next few weeks. And it's warning women to find an alternative. About 25,000 women take the 4 contraceptive pills affected. 2 kinds of Brevanor, along with Noramin and Necon. Pharmac says the supplier, Pfizer, doesn't expect to have them back in stock until mid-February next year. Family Planning's National Nursing Advisor, Rose Stewart, says it's a problem at the source.
The supply issue is caused by manufacturing issues, so the country is unable to get supply from the manufacturers. But from our perspective, pills weren't available and then they were suddenly available. This one's a bit bigger because it's the alternative contraceptive pills. We usually start people on a sort of a certain one, and these people taking these other pills, it's often because they hadn't been happy with the other one. So they've already tried another one. So that's the difficulty for them, because we want to be putting them back on the other one, but they probably don't want to. Yeah.
Right. So in this case, this is the preferred pill for a number of people who have tried a contraceptive pill and for some reason it has not been the right one for them.
Quite often, yes. So it could have been prescribed initially, but quite likely they've tried others. Yeah.
What have you been told to expect in terms of supplies?
Well, we've been told that there will be supply by January next year. So that's our understanding.
What does that mean, Rose?
Well, that means so where are we now? We're in October. So that's 3 months. So there are people who've been prescribed 6 months of the pill and they've been dispensed 3 months because there were shortages looming and the pharmacist has given them just half of their pills. And then they've gone back to the pharmacy and there are no more. So they now need to see somebody to change their pill.
And what's your concern here?
Well, I think, there's a bit of an issue for people because it means that they have to pay for another appointment. They've already had an appointment to get their pill, but they need to pay for another one. There's that. There's the inconvenience, the time inconvenience. There's the overall worry, that their preferred contraceptive is not going to be available. And they will be, when we see them, that we can provide other things, other options or different pills. There are other pills they could use which are not funded. So for people who've got more money, they've got more options than people, as is always the case, than people who have less money. So if funds are not an issue, you've got more choices.
So these contraceptive pills are subsidised ones?
They're all subsidised. We always prescribe subsidised contraception as much as possible. So the proportion of people that are using unsubsidised ones is quite small.
So the reality is some of the people taking this pill, it's going to cost them more.
It may cost them more for an extra consultation. So within the year, one extra consultation, I'm thinking, yeah.
How popular are these brands?
Well, the pill is generally extremely popular. So we've just done a big survey on contraception. It's a self-selected people, who are responding to the survey, so it's not like proper research or anything, but it did show that the most contraceptives that are used are the pills, so that's still the most popular contraceptive.
Are you worried that there could be a few slip-ups as a result of this?
Well, there's always a few slip-ups when you have interruption in contraceptive supply, yes, unfortunately, that's always an outcome, so we couldn't speculate about numbers, but there may be some people who are missing out and have an unintended pregnancy. That's quite possible.
What's your advice to women then right now?
Right now, we're saying if you've got plenty of supply, just carry on taking your pill as usual. If you're coming to the point where you would normally get some more, you need to go to your usual provider, which might be us or might be their GP or their school nurse or their youth health service. Ring them up and make an appointment to talk about your options and whether that's getting a different kind of pill or whether it's trying a completely different contraceptive for the meantime. So it's quite a good opportunity for people to try something different. Some people might be catapulted into thinking, yes, I really do want something more long-acting, so we can definitely help them with that.
Does it surprise you it's come to this?
It does. Yes, it does surprise me because we've never had this level of contraceptive pill supply issue. Before it's always been popular. We've always had a lot of people on the pill and we've never ever considered that there might be a supply issue.
Rose Stewart from Family Planning there. The first All Blacks team of the year has been named, and while 3 uncapped players will debut from the bench, the Matchday 23 is a largely predictable side for Sunday's Bledisloe Cup opener in Wellington. There's also palpable relief from the All Blacks players after it was confirmed the Rugby Championship schedule has been moved to allow the New Zealanders to be out of quarantine in time to spend Christmas with their families. Rugby reporter Joe Porter has more.
Coach Ian Foster sticking with the tried and true as he attempts to make a winning start to his reign, picking Richie Mo'unga at first 5 and Beauden Barrett at fullback.
Just feel that as this team is new, as we learn what we want to do, having two fantastic decision makers on the park is just going to help us guide ourselves around. So it's a selection for this test.
Foster has selected Geordie Barrett on the wing despite conceding he's the best fullback in New Zealand right now. He believes the experienced heads of Moonga and Bowden Barrett will help the team find their feet in their first test of the year.
Having both those players on is really important, and probably the form 15 in the country has been Geordie, and he's playing, and I think you'll find him in the backfield a lot anyway, so we kind of feel like we get best of both worlds.
George Bridge is on the left wing with the Blues' young gun Caleb Clark to make his debut from the bench, following in the footsteps of his father and former All Black Ironi Clark. Locke Tupuvai and Hoskins Sotutu are also set for their first cap, but Foster isn't ready to throw them in the deep end just yet.
We've erred on the side of a bit of experience there with George. We've got a lot of faith in him. And, I know Caleb's really excited, and this is a way to ease him into it, with the 3 debutants coming off the bench. We know there's going to be plenty of energy coming anyway.
Foster's counterpart, the Wallabies coach Dave Rennie, a little more experimental in naming 3 debutants in his starting side. For the born and bred New Zealander and former Upper Hutt club coach, the test holds plenty of significance on a personal level.
Obviously, I'm a Wellington boy and sort of played a first test in Wellington. There's a little bit of irony there. But look, I'm really excited. I'm really comfortable with the decision I made. I'm going to have all my family there. All my 3 sons and 2 granddaughters are all coming down to the game. So that's going to make it pretty special as well.
It will also be a special test for Rieko Ioane, who will start as All Blacks centre after moving from the wing. He denies he's been hassling Foster to give him a crack in the midfield, despite Geordie Barrett's claims to the contrary.
No, it wasn't like that. Look, I think whatever team I'm in, Blues, Auckland, whatever, I'm happy enough just to play.
You've been whinging at me for 2 years to play centre.
You were crying last night about the 14 jersey.
Jokes aside, the players are chuffed the Rugby Championship scheduling saga has come to an end, with the final All Blacks Wallabies match being moved from December the 12th to October the 31st. That means the All Blacks will be out of quarantine by Christmas, much to the relief of star Looseford and expectant father Ardie Savia, who'll start at number 8 alongside captain and open side Sam Cane and blind side Shannon Frizzell.
Yeah, mate, it's a tricky one because I've got number 2 on the way in like a week and a half, so it was quite tricky whether we left and I stayed behind, but everything's kind of fallen into place, so yeah, quite happy, mate.
Another piece of happy news for the Rugby Championship is the likely confirmation over the next few days that South Africa will be committing to the tournament. RNZ understands the Springboks have said yes to attending despite having played next to no rugby this year, with the team just waiting on approval from the South African government. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Joe Porter aho.
It's 21 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A sexual abuse survivor group believes research about sexual assaults on university students is conservative. A study by the New Zealand Medical Journal found 28% of students surveyed had experienced at least one form of sexual assault. Many of those had never told anyone about what had happened to them. Charlotte Cook filed this report.
Olivia Montgomery is a survivor of sexual assault. She was an Otago University student when it happened, and new research from the New Zealand Medical Journal shows she is not alone. Of 1,500 students surveyed, 28% reported at least one form of sexual assault, including 15% who reported rape. In nearly 1/3 of those cases, survivors didn't tell anyone about their experience. The numbers don't surprise Olivia Montgomery, who says there are many reasons people don't report it.
A lot of people who were assaulted knew the person that assaulted them and lived with them and had to continue living with them for the remainder of the year. And a lot of them didn't want to speak out or just brushed over it completely and trivialised the assault because of the culture of the university.
Olivia felt she wasn't listened to when she raised the assault, while other victims don't know where to go. Angelo Lebeau from Otsepote Collective Against Sexual Abuse believes the survey data is conservative and it's likely a much bigger problem at universities.
A lot of people don't want to often participate in research around sexual violence, particularly if they've had really negative experiences in the past, talking to people about their experience of sexual violence. It actually makes people less likely to want to talk about that again. I'm kind of not surprised it can be difficult to do research around this area. I think that the stuff that's available is really important, but I think it's also really important to remember that the research itself can be really challenging for people to participate in.
And it's not always a positive experience when victims do open up.
Not even just people not doing anything, but also full-on victim blaming that people experience and harassment just for raising the fact that somebody else has done something harmful. People are actually punished for that sometimes, and that can be a huge detraction.
Angelo Lebeau says more work is being done in the sector thanks to funding increases, but it might be a while before progress is seen. Study co-author, Otago University Associate Professor in Sociology, Melanie Barish, found getting the numbers needed for the study hard, saying victims often downplay what's happened. She believes underreporting is common for sexual assault in general, not just universities.
Many people don't necessarily recognise that their experiences were quote-unquote serious enough to seek out help, or they might not be sure how people will react. They may blame themselves or worry that other people will blame them for their experience. And so seeking help is something that's quite difficult to do for many people.
She says universities are working hard to address sexual violence, and more frequent research will be able to track if that change is positive. For Checkpoint, Charlotte Cook.
Helping students to earn money to live on while studying and extra support for mental health are two areas Pacific tertiary students want given more attention. Universities New Zealand figures show there were 10,000 full-time Pacifica students enrolled in May, an increase of 35% since 2010. As the country goes to the poll, RNZ takes a look at what could be improved in the sector to get more Pacifica students through the door. Dominic Godfrey filed this report.
Just over $100 million has been committed to help Pacific communities achieve their education aspirations over the next 30 years. But tertiary students say there are urgent needs.
First one is mental health and wellbeing.
One thing for sure is introducing a universal education income.
Leilani Vaiao is at Wellington's Victoria University, working towards a bachelor degree in political science, international relations and religious studies. She's also on the university's Pacifica Student Council. Ms Vaiao's not eligible for student allowance to help with living expenses because her parents earn over the threshold.
But I have 3 younger siblings under me who depend on that, and other family members who depend on my parents, and I can't get that aid so that I don't have to work all the shifts I work to be able to study and focus on that, because of the fact that my parents make money to support my family.
Ms Vaiao meets her living costs working multiple office shifts, which she balances with full-time study and a busy home life. During the lockdown, she was relieved to keep her job, but from home, though she lost her separation of study, work and family life.
As a child of the Pacific, or as a child in a multi-generational home, as the eldest child as well, there are a lot of factors that were still impacting mental health-wise and just stability-wise, really, in the home environment.
Rosina Buchanan is a self-described queer, non-binary person of colour with a disability. The Bachelor of Health student has found university difficult and complex to navigate without adequate mental health support.
Because I would encounter quite a bit of ableism, elitism, classism, homophobia, being misgendered, racism, and that is definitely a lot of barriers to being able to thrive.
National President of the Pacific student body, Tauira Pacifica, Ali Leota, says financial support is key. He'd like to see student allowance eligibility in a way that's fairer to Pacific families, as the parental income threshold doesn't take into account the number of dependents.
And coming from a big family, we're kind of victims of that. So therefore, implementing a universal education income is a way to pave the way forward to making tertiary education accessible and fit for purpose for our Pacific learners.
Mr Leota says postgraduate students should be included, as a lack of financial support is a barrier to Pacifica achieving master's and doctoral success. He says it's also a barrier to Pacifica moving into academia.
Do they go to work or do they continue to study? Of course, 9 times out of 10 our Pacifica students will opt to work to go help support families, but a universal education income will enable our students to climb up the ladder and make our tertiary spaces a space where we feel like we're welcomed.
While Labour has released a 5-point action plan to improve things for Pacific students, including to respond to unmet needs with an initial focus on needs arising from the COVID-19 pandemic, other parties lack university-specific education policy for Pacifica. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahine, ko Dominic Godfrey tēnei.
If you like whiskey, you'll know the key to the flavour is keeping it away from the light and letting it mature for years in a cask. In fact, most whiskies mature in oak barrels for at least 5 years and some for 30 years or more. While one company in the US says using technology, it's come up with a way to produce that barrel-aged whiskey taste in just days. Here's the co-founder of Bespoken Spirits, Stu Aaron, on how it works.
A simple way to think about what we've done is that we've deconstructed the barrel. So we take the same natural elements of just wood, toast, and char. We don't have any additives or chemicals needed for our method. And we reimagine the process of using those elements with modern material science and with data analytics. So we start with a source spirit, which could be a young spirit or an already matured spirit that the customer just isn't happy with when it came out of the barrel. And we can design what we want that spirit to be in a process that's analogous to a Pantone wheel for color, where instead of defining burnt orange or emerald green as a combination of red, yellow, and blue, we'll define French toast or smoky whiskey goodness as a combination of aroma, color, and taste. And then by selecting precisely the types, the quantities, and the mix of these wood pieces, which we call microstaves, along with how we toast and char those microstaves, and then how we control the environment within our activator, which is the large stainless steel drum that we've instrumented and controlled to precisely affect the chemical reactions, we can create billions of different recipes for very precise, bespoken results.
Stu Aaron there, the co-founder of Bespoken Spirits. Some of your feedback before we head off. A lot of you on Facebook saying absconders from managed isolation should be charged. This person says she should be put in jail. All these people in isolation facilities should be warned. If they try and escape, they will be jailed. No excuses. Another listener says, do they have to sign any document agreeing to the requirements for being accepted here? If not, then surely they should be, and it should be clear to them. On early voting, Michael says, I voted earlier for convenience, but have felt it was a bit soon as I now question slightly if I have made the right choices. Next time, I will hold off for a bit longer, says Michael. Another person on the isolation situation, this is the woman who escaped through the fire escape, says, are these New Zealand citizens and permanent residents returning? Do they know they have to be quarantined? And the last word tonight on the looming contraceptive shortage, this person says, pause for tone. Oh, for God's sakes, just use a condom.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A change to security procedures is being blamed for allowing a woman to abscond from a managed isolation facility. The woman's admitted leaving the Auckland hotel through a fire exit yesterday morning and walking around the city. Guards supposed to be watching the door in question were mistakenly on roving duty at the time. Shane Jones is insisting the decision to pay $96 million to upgrade more than 300 marae has nothing to do with boosting his election prospects. National's Judith Collins says the decision is outrageous. Fallback is apologising to thousands of women forced to change their oral contraceptive because supplies of some pill brands are running out. And President Trump has finished his therapy for COVID-19 and has been cleared by doctors to return to work. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tonight on Nights, we head to RNZ's Helen Young studio in 2004 with Wellington-based six-piece The Phoenix